I've been using Spring Framework for over a decade now, and they never cease to amaze me. So just as I thought they're out of tricks, I came across a very nice feature which we're going to explore today. That's the Spring and Docker Compose integration. One of the use cases for this is having to connect to a database from your application or microservice. And it's usually a bit of a hassle because when you set up for the first time, you need to set up the database in this case first and then make sure that your application can connect to it. So what we're going to do to get started is first we need to bring in the dependency, and the dependency is from Spring. This will be the Spring dependency for Docker Compose. So in your POM file, what you need to bring in is org Spring Framework boot. Okay. And then the artifact ID will be the Spring boot Docker Compose. Right. The next thing you need to remember is to just keep on refreshing your Maven just to make sure that the dependency is loaded. Oh, I've got an error. Oh, versioning. I don't need to bring the version in here because I've already set the Spring Boot version. Now we are happy. The second thing that you'll need to do is to create a Docker Compose file, because that's the point. I've got an empty compose file here, and what we really want to do in this case is just to bring in or set up a Postgres DB. So obviously you need the service, you need to give it a name and a container name, you'll need to give it the image, ports, and some more optional values. And the key thing here is environment variables for Postgres. In this case is the Postgres DB, the username and the password. And after this, you've created a Docker Compose file now and you're ready to go. But before that, we've got one more thing. So generally, if you've got the Docker Compose in the root of your project, meaning the same location as your POM file, then the Docker Compose dependency will find this automatically. But in my case, I've got it in a custom location within the project still. So you'll need this config for cases like this where you've got your Docker Compose in a different or a custom location. For that, you need to set up the Spring config as follows and tell it the file about the file location. So in this case, my Docker Compose is inside source Docker, and I named it Compose Postgres YAML. We have set this up. I'm about to run the application to test it. And here we are. You will notice that the Docker Compose dependency did kick in and located my Docker Compose file right here in this address. You'll also notice that the dependency made use of the Docker CLI to create the container. So you'll see the following steps. It created a container, it started the service, and it waited for connections. And finally, it ran the test to see that it's healthy, meaning that it's ready to be used. And if you scroll a little bit to the bottom, you'll also notice that Flyway did manage to find the DB details and eventually run as well. So that's good. So this also tells us that this Docker Compose has a way of communicating with the Spring's JDBC locator, because Flyway managed to find the DB details, but we did not specify anywhere in our application YAML file. So the key takeaway notes here are that there's also some magic in Spring underneath, and if you dig a little bit deeper, you will find the relevant classes that actually have this database details all the way from the Docker Compose dependency. This means your Docker Compose file is the one that's feeding your Docker Compose dependency the database details. And after feeding that information, it means the Springs JDBC client somewhere has a way of finding those details, hence being able to connect to the DB and starting our app. So let's recap the steps that you need to take. The main step that you need to do is include the Docker Compose dependency first. And then from there, you can create your Docker Compose file. The Docker Compose file will have all the relevant properties that you need. And the last piece is that, remember, if you've got your Docker Compose in a different location other than the root of your project, then you need to specify this configuration. In my case, I had this Docker Compose configuration file in a different location, which is the source Docker folder. If you don't have it in a custom location or a preferred location other than the project root where your POM file is, then you do not need to specify this config. You can just have the first two steps and that's it. And that's it for this quick tutorial on using Spring Boot and Docker Compose integration. If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Feel free to leave any comments or questions below. Thanks for watching.